A research team in Blanco County, Texas, pulled footage from a grid of trail cameras planted deep inside hog territory in 2014 and witnessed something that should not have been possible. The traps were untouched. Hunter reports showed nothing unusual. Wildlife agencies had no explanation. And yet, across Texas, Georgia, and Oklahoma, entire sounders of 30, 40 animals were not moving to a neighboring county, they were vanishing. Gone from land, they had dominated for half a millennium. What those cameras captured at dawn did not just identify a predator. It exposed a 500-year-old lie about who really controls the American wilderness. Here is what the official narrative has told us. Feral hogs are an unstoppable biological juggernaut, an invasive catastrophe so deeply embedded in the American landscape that only aggressive human intervention, worth $3 billion in annual damage control, can hold them at bay. The USDA estimates 6.9 million feral hogs roaming at least 35 states. Texas alone holds 2.66 million, present in 253 of the state's 254 counties. Texas A&M puts annual damage in Texas alone at over $500 million. Nationwide, $3 billion is destroyed every year. One farmer in Williamson County walked out at sunrise to find 24 acres of corn reduced to churned mud overnight. $40,000. Gone. That is the scale of what humans have been fighting and failing to stop for decades. But something was already winning that war, quietly, at dawn, and the institutions spending billions of dollars on the problem were paying to make sure it stopped. Before we get to what those cameras recorded, you need to understand exactly what they were pointed at, because feral hogs are not a pest problem. They are a 5-century-old catastrophe that humans created, ignored, and then spent a fortune failing to fix. It started with Spanish explorers. In the 1500s, conquistadors released domestic pigs along the Gulf coastline as a living food supply for future expeditions, a self-sustaining meat reserve waiting for the next ship. Those pigs escaped, they spread, and for a few hundred years, the problem stayed manageable. Then, in the early 1900s, wealthy landowners imported Eurasian wild boars specifically for sport hunting. These were not pink farm animals. They were dense, aggressive, thick-skulled survivors built for the harshest forests on the continent. When they interbred with the feral domestic pigs already established across the South, the hybrid that emerged was something nobody had planned for and nobody knew how to stop. Faster, harder to kill, and capable of reproducing at a rate that genuinely unsettles researchers who study it for a living. One female, 2 litters per year, up to 12 piglets each time. Those piglets reach breeding age in as few as 6 months. Left unchecked, a single pair becomes hundreds of animals within a few years. Think about that, not in abstract terms, in acres, in water infrastructure, in corn that was standing at sunset and gone by sunrise. Adult feral hogs carry tusks past 6 inches. They sprint at 30 miles per hour. They clear 40-inch fences without breaking stride. Their skin is backed by nearly an inch of dense fat that makes light-caliber ammunition almost irrelevant. Veteran hunters across the South repeat the same warning: miss the precise vital spot and the shot means nothing. The animal runs, and it remembers. Feral hogs learn trap locations, memorize human schedules, and share that behavioral knowledge within their groups. Every failed removal attempt creates a slightly more difficult population than the one before it. So when sounders started disappearing across Blanco County, wildlife agencies were not celebrating. They were confused. The agencies running the removal programs had a working theory. The disappearances were a data artifact. Hogs moving between counties faster than survey teams could track them. Populations shifting in response to drought, crop rotation, land use changes. It was a reasonable explanation. It fit everything they already believed about hog behavior. There was just one problem. The movement data did not support it. GPS-collared animals from adjacent territories were holding position. Hunters in neighboring counties were reporting no unusual influx. Whatever was happening to those sounders, they were not relocating, they were gone. Wildlife managers had poured extraordinary resources into understanding this animal. Corral traps baited with corn and triggered remotely. Aerial gunning operations running helicopters at dawn over open rangeland. The most effective human removal method ever deployed against feral hogs, achieving, at best, a 66% reduction in targeted areas before populations rebounded within 2 years. The trap and remove programs cost counties hundreds of thousands of dollars annually and required constant, unrelenting pressure just to hold populations flat. The moment funding paused, the numbers climbed. That was the established reality of feral hog management, not victory, not progress, sustained containment at enormous cost. And now entire sounders were disappearing without a single trap being sprung. If this is reshaping what you thought you knew about the American wilderness, hit subscribe. We go deep on stories like this, the ones that challenge the official narrative with actual evidence. Now, back to what they found in the footage, because the next piece of evidence is the one that forced researchers to rewrite the question entirely. The Blanco County team did not deploy their camera grid expecting to find a predator. They expected to find a behavioral pattern, a migration corridor, a food source, some ecological variable that explained the movement. What they found was about to change the entire framework of the feral hog war, not because it was unexpected, because it was already in progress, had been in progress for years, and had been operating at a scale that no agency model had even thought to measure. The footage showed coyotes, not one, not two scavengers circling the margins of a dead animal. A coordinated group, 4, sometimes 5, moving through dense brush in a formation that wildlife biologist Sarah Cunningham, reviewing the footage frame by frame, described as having surgical consistency. Cunningham holds a doctorate in predator-prey dynamics from Texas A&M and had spent a decade studying coyote behavior across the southern plains. When someone with that background watches a predator sequence and reaches for the word surgical, that is not enthusiasm, that is a precise, technical observation. What the cameras had captured was not scavenging, it was targeted. The attacks were happening in a narrow window, between 5:30 and 7:00 a.m., consistently, across multiple sites, across multiple weeks. Cunningham's analysis identified the pattern immediately. Mother hogs returning from night foraging carry the full metabolic cost of nursing litters. At dawn, their vigilance is lowest, and their piglets are most exposed. The coyotes had found the exact moment in the hog's biological cycle where the armor came off. They were not hunting adult hogs. They were dismantling the pipeline, eliminating litters before they could become the next generation of breeders. Not slowing the population, collapsing it from the bottom up. If you made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't look away from the facts that institutions ignore. Subscribe to stay informed, because the next piece of evidence is even more disturbing. Nature had quietly assembled a solution, and then the state government started paying people to dismantle it. Here is where it gets impossible to ignore. The coyote bounty programs were not a fringe policy. They were mainstream, well-funded, and politically popular across precisely the states where the hog crisis was most acute. Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia counties paying $75 per coyote, some programs running as high as $100 with no ceiling on total payouts. The logic was straightforward and in isolation defensible. Ranchers had long blamed coyotes for livestock losses, particularly among young cattle and sheep. Removing them seemed like sound agricultural management. Nobody modeled what removing them would do to the feral hog population, because at the time, nobody believed the connection existed. Dr. Marcus Friedman, a wildlife consultant with over 2 decades of ecosystem impact assessments across the southern United States, was among the researchers who brought the correlation data to state officials. What he presented was not a theory, it was a number. In counties where coyote removal programs had been most aggressively enforced over a 3-year period, documented feral hog populations had tripled. Not grown, not expanded, tripled. Friedman has described the moment he presented that data to a room of state program administrators as meeting dead silence, followed by people putting their heads in their hands. When a room full of officials responsible for managing the crisis puts their heads in their hands, that is not bureaucratic discomfort. That is the realization that the program they designed, funded, and defended had been executing the only force actually winning the war. The state had paid, conservatively, millions of dollars to gut its own defense. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Why do you think it took this long to make the connection? If this video showed you something you have never heard before, hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next reframes everything you have just seen. The strategy that replaced it is built on a completely different logic. The modern integrated approach does not try to replace what nature built. It works alongside it. Aerial gunning and targeted trapping are deployed against adult breeding populations, the animals too large and too experienced for any coyote pack to reliably take. Meanwhile, in territories where coyote populations are protected and allowed to stabilize, Cunningham's data shows litter survival rates dropping by more than half within 2 seasons. The technology handles the armor. The coyotes dismantle the pipeline. Together, they accomplish what neither could alone: sustained, compounding reduction instead of the endless, expensive stalemate that defined 5 decades of hog management. The strategy that replaced it is built on a completely different logic, not control, collaboration. The lesson here extends well beyond feral hogs. Look at what this investigation actually found, assembled in sequence. A predator operating in coordinated groups, targeting a precise biological vulnerability, achieving population suppression that no human program had matched. DNA evidence confirming active predation on a scale nobody had measured. A direct, documented correlation between coyote removal and hog population explosion, tripling in 36 months across multiple counties. And at the center of all of it, a bounty program funded by taxpayer dollars that was paying hunters to eliminate the ecosystem's own immune response. Not one piece of evidence, not one researcher with an outlier theory, a trail camera record, a DNA laboratory, a population dataset, 3 independent lines of physical, measurable, verifiable evidence, all describing the same thing. If this is true, and the data indicates it is, then the single most expensive wildlife management failure in American history was not caused by the hog. It was caused by the assumption that nature had no answer and that only human intervention could provide one. That assumption cost billions of dollars, decades of escalating damage, and the deliberate removal of the very animals quietly solving the problem for free. The question is no longer whether coyotes can function as a meaningful check on feral hog populations. The evidence settled that. The question is how many other ecological relationships we are currently severing in the name of management, how many other solutions we are actively funding programs to destroy in ecosystems we do not yet fully understand, against problems we have not yet recognized as our own creation. That is not a question about hogs, it is a question about us, about the institutional reflex to intervene, to control, to replace natural systems with engineered ones, and about what it costs when we are wrong. If this changed how you see the American wilderness, subscribe and turn on notifications. We read every comment. Share this with someone who needs to see it. The coyotes were winning the war. We paid people to stop them.